Welcome back to the channel, guys, and welcome to the 2004 Volvo S60R. The very first Volvo I'll have ever had on the channel, and actually the second Volvo I think I've ever driven. The other one being the XC90 that my dad owns, so this is going to be an interesting one. The owner, Kevin, mentioned that this has no mods except for front subframe bushings. It has about 150,000 miles. But what is the S60R? Well, the R means this is the high-performance version of the first generation Volvo S60 compact sedan. The base S60 is a front-wheel drive vehicle. This one has a Haldex all-wheel drive system. Most of the time, it's basically 90% of power to the front axle, 10% to the rear, but when it detects that you need some assistance based on various sensors, it'll send up to, I think, 70% of the power to the rear end. Not the most sophisticated setup, as we've all come to learn over the past 20 or 30 years of driving Haldex-equipped vehicles such as Volkswagens and Audis, but that's not really the point of this car. This isn't a crazy track car. It's meant to be a sporty, everyday driver. Now, this has adaptive suspension, which is pretty interesting for a 2004 model year. The suspension was a joint effort by Monroe and Öhlins. Makes sense given that Volvo is a Swedish brand, so is Öhlins. And we can use these three buttons here for the active chassis settings, Comfort, Sport, and Advanced, which adjusts the damping profile as well as the throttle response. In terms of the interior, it actually feels pretty well built. It's a nice place to be for a 2004 model year. It is a 6-speed manual, and check this out. The base of the shifter actually spins. It feels like a sphere that spins around the lever itself. That's hilarious, and you don't actually see where the gates are. Very interesting buttons for your climate control. Definitely not used to this era of Volvo design. And these seats, where do I start? They are extremely soft. They're very, very comfortable. They're leather, of course, but it feels like I'm sitting on a couch. There's so much cushioning, and yet there's a reasonable amount of bolstering both for your back and your thighs. Pretty run-of-the-mill Volvo steering wheel. Nothing about this interior is particularly flashy. Same with the exterior of this car. It just looks like any other Volvo S60, except it's got an R badge on it, and it's got these 18-inch wheels. The car doesn't sit particularly low. It's not a very aggressive looking car, just some different front and rear bumpers. We're powered by a 2.5-liter inline 5-cylinder turbocharged, transversely mounted to go along with the Haldex all-wheel drive system. It makes 296 horsepower. You can round that up to 300. And 295 pound-feet of torque. This car should weigh somewhere between 3,500 and 3,700 pounds. There are varying reports. It's not a lightweight car, let's just put it that way. Very simple and easy to read gauges. Red line looks to be about 7,000 RPM. We'll start off in comfort mode. The one thing that's very interesting about this and might hinder the daily drivability a bit is the turning radius. It is abysmal. Kevin, the owner, mentioned this to me, and I found out for myself when I was trying to make a U-turn. All right, first gear. Very characteristic inline 5-cylinder sound. Not the smoothest engine. Very slow steering ratio. We do have hydraulic power steering, and it's very light. The on-center feel, not great. Ooh, very soft suspension damping in comfort mode. Let me just put that right into sport, because it's very not confidence inspiring, let's say, in comfort. All right, definitely a bit firmer here in sport. Immediately noticeable. Throttle response is a little heightened as well. Now, interestingly, when I upshift, the revs actually blip up when I clutch in. You have to be very intentional about letting your foot off the throttle before you clutch in. Decent straight line performance. I think 0 to 60 on these was in the mid-5s. The brake feel is not good. I don't know if it's just because these need to be bled, but very soft initial pedal feel. Oh, the throttle response is tricky. Now the engine, despite having a characteristic inline 5 sound, it's not very loud, which makes it a little tricky for me to nail those rev matches. The engine has a very linear torque curve. The top end, while not particularly strong or exciting, the power doesn't really die off towards the red line either, which is nice. But the moment you drive this hard in the corners, you feel the limitations of the Haldex all-wheel drive. It more or less feels like a front-wheel drive car. It really does. But when you put your foot down coming out of corners, you can feel the rear end just start to hook up. So it does give you a good amount of confidence on corner exit, but corner entry and mid-corner, the car does default to understeer. Right here, you can just feel there's so much mass at the front. This 5-cylinder engine is mounted mostly in front of that front axle. All right, let's try advanced mode. Let's see if it's way too aggressive for this bumpy road. Bit of understeer on entry, and then you just get on the gas and it powers you out. Oh yeah, these dampers are really firm now in advanced mode. A little too firm. Let's put it back into sport. I think sport definitely works the best for this type of driving. The damping quality actually feels pretty good, but there's no getting around this much mass and just the inherent suboptimal front to rear weight distribution. The handling of this car really does remind me of an Audi from the period. A lot of Audis from this time also used Haldex all-wheel drive, transversely mounted engines, very nose heavy. This gives a similar feeling. These engines, apparently, these 2.5 liters, have been bored out from the base S60's 5-cylinder, which is a 2.3, I believe. But by boring it out, Volvo made the cylinder walls thinner because the cylinders are now closer together. And so when you overheat these engines, apparently they are quite prone to cracking. Oh, I gotta say though, I'm very comfortable in these seats. It's like sitting on a bolstered couch. You'll never be afraid of oversteer when driving this car hard. This car just defaults to understeer, and so it makes for a very safe driving experience as long as you don't completely overcook a corner. What a hilarious little car. Here's one thing you should know. Kevin paid $8,000 for this car not that long ago. There are very few used cars now, performance-focused cars with a manual transmission with 300 horsepower at that you can pick up for $8,000. So in some ways, this thing is a steal. You get all-wheel drive, all-weather capability, a punchy 300 horsepower inline 5-cylinder engine, a manual transmission, a nice interior, well-built, usable back seat. But is it a driver's car? Is it a sports sedan? Absolutely not, in my opinion. You can't even really compare this to something like an E39 M5, E46 M3, or hell, even an E46 ZHP, or a C32, C55 AMG. It's not that kind of car, but I will say, it would make a really good daily. Very comfortable, very easy to drive. The 6-speed manual actually feels excellent. It slots into each gate really nice and smoothly. As long as you can live with the terrible turning radius, this thing's a pretty damn good everyday little sedan. So big shout out to Kevin for letting me review this S60R. Let me know what you think about this car. Are these worth the asking price, if you can even find them? There are very few for sale. Is it a future classic? Have these hit the bottom of the depreciation curve? Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next video.